I can't lose him too, not when I'm the only thing standing between Noah and nothing." The words tore out of Valentina Harper before she could stop them. The all-night pharmacy on Biscayne Boulevard buzzed like dying insects at 2:33 a.m., casting sickly green shadows across her bruised face. One eye swollen completely shut. Handprints mapping across her throat in purple and yellow, a man's fingers, Harold Brennan's fingers, pressing down like he owned the very air she breathed. She clutched the prescription in one shaking hand. Her other hand opened and closed around exactly $17 in singles and coins. The total of her tips from an 8-hour shift at the diner. Every penny she had left in the world. The pharmacist, a tired woman with half-moon glasses perched on her nose, repeated the price without looking up from her register. $143. Valentina's knees buckled. She gripped the counter to stay standing. "Please," she whispered. "My son. He can't breathe without this. His asthma. He's 6 years old and I just need until tomorrow." "I can?" "I don't have a payment plan," the pharmacist said flatly. "Cash or card?" "That's it." Outside, summer thunder cracked the sky open. Rain began to hammer the pavement like fists against glass. Valentina turned toward the window and watched it fall, watched the empty parking lot turn black with water. Lightning split the darkness for one bright moment, and she saw nothing but her own reflection in the glass, hollow-eyed, destroyed. She looked back at the pharmacist. "I have $17. Silence stretched between them. The pharmacist's fingers stopped moving across her keyboard. "Then I can't help you," she said, and turned away. Valentina's voice broke into pieces. The words came pouring out now, unstoppable, desperate. She told the pharmacist about Harold Brennan cornering her in the apartment stairwell at 6 p.m., about how he demanded the 3 months of overdue rent she couldn't pay, about what his hands had done when she refused to pay with something far worse. She pulled her collar down slightly, just enough for the pharmacist to see the bruises shaped like fingers. She talked about the 5-day eviction notice taped to her door. $85,000 or she and Noah would be on the street. The pharmacist listened with her back turned. She did not move. She did not speak. She just stood there, restocking bottles of cough syrup with mechanical precision, each movement saying, "I do not want to know this." The pharmacy door chimed. A man entered, shaking rainwater from an expensive black overcoat. Tall. Early 40s. With the kind of presence that made the fluorescent light seem dimmer by comparison. Dark hair slicked back from his face. A scar running from the corner of his left eye down to his cheekbone like a blade had carved him open and sealed the wound imperfectly. He wore a tailored suit beneath the coat, white dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar, showing the curve of his chest. He was bleeding. A dark stain spread across his ribs, seeping through the white fabric. He moved slowly, deliberately, each step controlled despite the blood that dripped onto the checkered floor. 2 men in identical black suits followed him inside, their eyes scanning the pharmacy with the precision of soldiers clearing a room. Valentina stepped backward. Everything in her body screamed danger. The man walked directly to the counter as though Valentina didn't exist. His voice came out like thunder wrapped in velvet. "I need medical supplies. Bandages. Gauze. Antiseptic. Antibiotics. The strongest pain medication you have without a prescription." The pharmacist's entire demeanor shifted. Her spine straightened. Her voice became smaller, careful, rehearsed. "Of course. Right away," she said. He pulled out a money clip. Not a wallet. A clip holding cash so thick it looked like a brick. $100 bills. He didn't count them. He simply peeled off several and laid them on the counter like they were nothing. $500. Maybe 6. Valentina watched the pharmacist move faster than she had moved all night, pulling items from shelves with trembling hands. The man with the scar stood motionless, his hand pressed against his wound, blood seeping between his fingers. The taller of his 2 men, the one with a face like a stone wall, noticed Valentina. His eyes moved across her swollen face, her throat, her shaking hands. He leaned toward the man with the scar and spoke in a language she didn't recognize. Korean. Low and rapid. The man with the scar turned his head. His eyes found hers. They were dark. Darker than any eyes she had ever seen. Like staring into the night itself. "What happened to your face?" he asked. His voice was so direct, so devoid of pity, that it somehow hurt more than sympathy would have. It was the voice of someone accustomed to violence, speaking to someone who had just experienced it. Recognition. Understanding. Valentina couldn't speak. The words had dried up somewhere between her bruised throat and her shattered heart. "Landlord," one of his men answered for her. The shorter one, with a face that suggested he might smile sometimes. "Beat her for back rent." The man with the scar said nothing. He simply turned back to the counter as the pharmacist thrust a plastic bag at him, filled with supplies. He placed more cash on the counter, another $300, and picked up the bag with his free hand, his other hand still pressed against his wound. He was leaving. He was actually leaving. Valentina didn't know why she moved. Survival instinct was screaming at her to be invisible, to stay small, to never draw the attention of men like this. But Noah's inhaler cost $143, and she had 17. And something in the way this man had looked at her bruises, like he understood exactly what violence felt like, made her step forward. "Wait," she said. Her voice came out like gravel. "The money you just spent. For the supplies. That's $1,000, maybe more. For bandages." He stopped. The two men instantly tensed, their hands moving toward their jackets. "I have a son," Valentina continued, the words tumbling out now, reckless and desperate. "He's 6. His asthma medicine costs $143. I have 17. The pharmacist says no payment plans. So he won't have his inhaler when he wakes up in a few hours, and if his asthma attacks, I won't be able to do anything but watch him struggle to breathe." She paused. She pulled out her mother's gold locket from beneath her uniform collar with shaking fingers. The one piece of beautiful thing she owned. The only thing worth selling. "I can pay you back," she said. "I'll work it off. I'll do whatever you need. But I need you to lend me $126. That's all. The 17 I have plus your money and I can save my son." The man with the scar stood completely still. His men exchanged a look that passed between them like lightning. In 15 years of working for Luca Russo, they had never seen him hesitate over anything. Never seen him stop mid-exit for a stranger. But he stopped now. He looked at the prescription in her hand. Then at her throat. Then at the locket dangling from her trembling fingers. "The blood on my clothes," he said quietly, "came from someone who believed he could take what wasn't his. I shot him for it. 4 times. Once for each finger he laid on someone else." Valentina's breath caught. "I'm Luca Russo," he continued. "I own this city. And I'm about to do something I haven't done in a very long time." He reached into his jacket. Slow. Deliberate. Both his men tensed beside him, ready for whatever came next. He pulled out a phone. He made a single call. One sentence in Korean. Then he hung up. "Your son's medicine," he said, "is being delivered to your address in 20 minutes. Free of charge. The pharmacist will confirm it when the courier arrives." Valentina couldn't breathe. The room tilted. "Why would you?" "Because the people who did this to you," Luca Russo said, gesturing toward her bruises, "believed you were nobody. And I don't accept that belief." He turned to leave. The rain hammered harder outside, the thunder so close now it shook the windows. His men followed him toward the door. "What's your name?" he called back. "Valentina," she whispered. "Valentina Harper." He nodded once. A small gesture, but it carried weight. "Put the locket away, Valentina Harper," he said. "You're not selling anything tonight." He stepped out into the rain. The door chimed as it closed behind him. Through the window, Valentina watched a black Mercedes materialize from the storm like a ghost, watched the three of them disappear into the darkness. The pharmacist stared at her. "That was Luca Russo," the pharmacist said slowly, as if speaking to someone who had just woken from a very long sleep. Valentina nodded. She didn't have words for what had just happened. She put her mother's locket back beneath her collar. She held it there, over her heart, and waited for the courier to arrive. Outside, the rain fell harder, drumming against the pavement, washing the world clean. And somewhere in the night, in a mansion built on secrets and power, a man who hadn't thought about his dead daughter in 10 seconds was now thinking about her constantly, his hand pressed against his wound, bleeding in the back seat of a Mercedes as the city raced past. Some nights change everything. This was one of them. But Valentina didn't know that yet. She was still standing in the pharmacy, still holding $17 in her shaking hand, still believing that kindness from a strange man at 2:06 in the morning was a miracle. She had no idea that miracles, once they begin, never stop. They only accelerate. 6 hours earlier, and the Starlight Diner sits on the edge of downtown Miami like a ship that had run aground decades ago and never managed to leave. The neon sign flickers in the darkening sky, the starlight in fading pink, the letters dying one at a time, brought back to life by the failing electrical current that kept the whole establishment breathing. Inside, the black and white checkered floor gleams under fluorescent tubes, the kind that hum with a sound like insects trapped in a glass jar, and the smell of burnt coffee mingles with old fryer oil, a grease that has worked itself into the walls and ceiling and probably the very molecules of the air. Valentina Harper stands at table 7, a coffee pot in one hand and a notepad in the other, her orthopedic shoes, white and practical and worn through at the heel, pressing her weight into the sticky floor with each small step. She is 29 years old but looks somewhere between 35 and eternal exhaustion, her dark hair pulled back so tightly it pulls at the corners of her eyes, her uniform faded from a cream color into something closer to the walls of her apartment, something that has surrendered all resistance to the world's indifference. The man in the booth, a trucker with a name tag that says Dale and a wedding ring that has left a permanent pale groove in his finger, slides a $5 bill across the table. Valentina's eyes drop to it immediately. Not because she is rude, but because $5 matters. $5 is ammunition. $5 is the difference between Noah having milk for his cereal or watering down the last carton she bought 3 days ago. She slides the bill into her apron pocket with the 3 singles already there, bringing her total to $8 and some change, and she still has 2 more hours before closing. The math is automatic now, the calculation of survival running in the background of her mind like a program that never stops executing. "You need anything else?" Her voice comes out hoarse, and she clears her throat. She hasn't had water since lunch. The manager, Carlos, a man shaped like a rotund bird with a temper to match, charges for employee beverages. Dale shakes his head. He is looking at her the way many men look at Valentina, with a mixture of pity and something else, something that makes her skin feel like it is shrinking. She has learned to notice these looks and move past them, the way you might step over broken glass without really seeing it anymore. The clock above the register reads 6:36 p.m. She has been working since 2 o'clock that afternoon. 12 more hours until she can leave. 16 hours total, the same as yesterday, the same as tomorrow. Carlos appears at the kitchen window, his face red and glistening with sweat, and he snaps his fingers, an actual snapping sound that travels across the diner like a whip. Table 3 needs their order. "Move, Harper. Your shift isn't about tips. It's about speed." The thing about survival, Valentina has learned, is that it requires you to accept small humiliations as payment for breathing. You swallow them. You pocket the money. You move to table 3. The evening fragments into individual moments. A woman complaining that her eggs are too runny. A group of teenagers laughing at a joke Valentina did not hear and does not want to understand. The coffee pot growing lighter in her hand as she refills cups, the liquid black as the water that drips from her apartment ceiling when it rains. At 9:23 p.m., during a brief gap between tables, she uses the diner's phone to call Mrs. Chen, her neighbor, the woman who is watching Noah tonight. "How is he?" Valentina's voice is quiet, careful not to be heard by Carlos, who believes personal calls are a form of theft. "He is watching the cartoon," Mrs. Chen says. Through the phone, Valentina can hear the television, bright, cheerful sounds, the kind of sounds that Noah should hear more often. "But Valentina, his breathing." Mrs. Chen trails off. She does not need to finish. They both know about Noah's breathing, the slight wheeze that has gotten worse since the fall, since the humidity came and he stopped going outside, since his mother could no longer afford the medication that helped him breathe like a normal child. "I will be home by midnight," Valentina says. "Maybe 1 o'clock. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen." She hangs up before Mrs. Chen can say anything else, before anyone can see the way her hands have begun to shake. She takes the trembling down into her apron pocket where no one can see it. She ties her apron tighter. She returns to the floor. By 11:15 p.m., the diner has emptied into something closer to a museum of exhaustion. A man sleeping in booth 12 with his head against the window. 2 insomniacs at the counter, nursing coffee and their own private demons. Carlos counting the register in the back, his voice loud even in silence, the way cruel people's voices carry. Valentina cleans. She has always been cleaning or moving or existing in some state of preparation for the next requirement. She wipes the booth where Dale Saturday. She collects the cups. She counts her tips again, spreading the bills and coins across the break room table, 2 ones, 3 ones, a 5, and coins that add up to $2.17. $17 total. She has $17 in the entire world. She puts the money in her apron pocket. She puts her apron in her locker. She takes the bus home. The Mercer building on Collins Avenue does not announce itself. There is no brass nameplate, no doorman, nothing to suggest that the structure was ever intended to house human beings. It is a box of beige concrete with windows like empty eye sockets, and the security light in the entrance has been broken since August. Valentina climbs the stairs to the 3rd floor, her orthopedic shoes echoing against the concrete, and she is thinking about Noah's breathing, about the medication, about whether she can negotiate with Dr. Patel again, when she sees the figure blocking the hallway outside her apartment door. Harold Brennan is 52 years old, though he carries himself like a man who believes age is merely a number that has not yet been properly explained to him. He is paunchy, his body settling into itself the way wet sand settles, and he is sweating, not from exertion but from something else, something that comes from inside him, some internal heat that his body cannot contain. His shirt is the color of cream that has started to separate, and his tie hangs like a noose that he has decided to keep around his neck for decoration. "Valentina," he says, and his voice is the voice of a man who has decided that his own desire is the most important fact in the universe. "We need to talk about your rent." She tries to move past him. The hallway is narrow. The air is suddenly very hot. 3 months overdue, he continues, stepping slightly closer. "That's 30,000 base, plus penalties, plus late fees. We're looking at $85,000 total. Your lease says." "I have the money coming," Valentina says. It is a lie. They both know it is a lie, but lying is sometimes the only resistance available to someone with no other weapons. "Next month my hours." "Your hours won't change." His eyes move across her body with the deliberation of a man reading a menu. "But we could work something out. An arrangement. Just you and me. Right now. In your apartment. 20 minutes. That covers 2 months. Maybe 3, depending on how cooperative you are." The hallway narrows further. She can feel the walls closing in, the concrete pressing down from above, the air becoming something that cannot sustain human life. She moves to the left. He moves to the left. She is blocked. "No," she says. The word is small, barely audible. "No." He laughs, and the laugh is not a sound of humor but a sound of power, the sound of a man who has never heard the word no applied to himself and finds it amusing. His hand reaches out. His fingers wrap around her throat like they own it, like they purchased it along with the building, and he pushes her backward against the wall. The concrete connects with her spine, and all the air that was in her lungs empties into nothing. You think you're too good? His voice is close now, his breath hot against her face. You're nothing, Valentina Harper. Nobody. You're a waitress with a broken apartment and a bastard child, and exactly 5 days before I throw you and your son into the street where you belong. His fist comes next. It connects with her left eye. She feels the bone beneath her skin crack slightly, feels the warmth of blood beginning to pool. She falls, her body hitting the concrete, her arms instinctively going up to protect her face. He stands over her for 3 seconds, just long enough for her to see his shoes, expensive leather, worth more than she has earned in 2 years, and then he leaves. His footsteps descend the staircase. A door opens and closes somewhere below. The hallway is silent again, except for her breathing, which has become something she has to work to maintain. She sits there for a long time. Maybe 5 minutes. Maybe longer. The darkness of the hallway seems to press down on her like a physical weight. Then she gets up. She makes it to her apartment door. She uses her key. She enters. The apartment is small, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that is really just a corner where appliances have been arranged, and Noah is asleep on the couch, his small body curled against a cushion that is losing its stuffing. His breathing is shallow. She watches his chest rise and fall, each one a separate miracle that she is not guaranteed to see again. She goes to the bathroom. She locks the door. She looks in the mirror. Her left eye is swelling, the skin already darkening into purple. There is a cut on her cheekbone where his ring caught her skin. Her throat has bloomed into bruises, 5 fingers and a palm visible on her neck like a map of someone else's violence. She touches her face and does not recognize it. This is what nobody looks like. This is the face of someone the world has decided does not matter. She has 5 days to produce $85,000 or she and Noah will be on the street. She has $17 in her apron pocket. She opens the medicine cabinet and looks at the bottles, aspirin, a cream for rashes, nothing for Noah's breathing because that medication costs money and money is something that exists in a different dimension from where she lives. She closes the cabinet. She goes to her bedroom. She pulls out the small wooden box from beneath the bed. Inside is her mother's gold locket, small and oval-shaped, the kind of thing that was probably worth money before it became precious to her. It is the only inheritance she has. The only thing that was not bought on credit or borrowed or begged for. The only thing that is actually hers. She holds it in her palm. She whispers to it like it can hear her, not yet. Please not yet. The rain begins somewhere after midnight. It starts as a whisper against the window and becomes a scream, the kind of rain that sounds like the sky is breaking apart. And in that rain, blocks away, a man in an expensive tailored suit is bleeding into the back seat of a car, his hand pressed against his wound, his 2 lieutenants staring straight ahead, the city blurring past them like a painting being washed away. Tomorrow, Valentina Harper will walk to the pharmacy on Ocean Drive. Tomorrow, everything will change. The rain hammers against the diner windows like fists demanding entry. Valentina Harper moves through the graveyard shift on autopilot, her body present but her mind fracturing in 1,000 directions. The clock above the counter reads 3:22 a.m. 2 truckers sit silent in the corner booth, coffee cooling in front of them. Old Eddie at the counter stares into nothing, a ritual he performs every night at this hour. The fluorescent lights hum their tired song, casting everything in a sickly greenish glow that makes her bruised face look like a corpse. She had called in sick this morning. Harold Brennan had made that decision for her when his hand wrapped around her throat and squeezed until her vision spotted with black stars. But calling in sick meant lost wages, and lost wages meant the math became even more impossible. So here she is, moving between tables with the grace of someone who has learned to make herself smaller, quieter, less noticeable. Her orthopedic shoes squeak against the linoleum with each step. Every sound feels like a confession. The eviction notice is still taped to her apartment door. 5 days remaining. $85,000 or nothing. She has counted the $17 in her apron pocket 43 times since this morning. The number does not change. Mathematics, she has learned, is absolute and merciless. The door to the diner crashes open with such violence that Eddie jumps, his coffee sloshing across the counter. Wind and rain flood in, carrying the smell of wet asphalt and the electric charge of the summer storm. Valentina's head snaps up. What pours through that door are two massive men in black suits, their shoulders nearly touching the frame, and between them they are half-carrying, half-dragging a third man whose tailored jacket is turning crimson. Sergio and Theo move like machines programmed for crisis. They scan the diner in one practice sweep, assessing threats, exits, witnesses. Their eyes pass over Valentina as if she is furniture. She is the kind of woman the powerful never truly see. They maneuver their burden toward booth 7, the one in the back corner where the light is dimmest, and lower him onto the cracked vinyl seat. Luca Russo, 39 years old, sharp Korean features carved by ambition and violence, expensive watch catching light as his hand presses against his wound. His black shirt is open at the collar, revealing the beginning of a scar that runs down his chest like a river. Blood seeps through his fingers, steady and relentless, pooling on the seat beneath him and dripping to the checkerboard floor in a rhythm like a clock counting down. Sergio's phone is already in his hand. Doctor on the way. 23 minutes minimum from Kendall. His voice carries the flat authority of a man accustomed to emergencies. Theo presses his jacket against the wound, but his hands shake. Boss, we need a hospital. That's a deep bleed. Hospital now. No hospitals, Luca rasps, his accent thickening with pain. No cops. No paper trails. Valentina stands frozen for 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, she calculates the wound depth from the blood pattern, the entry point beneath the ribs, the steady flow that means an artery is involved, the man's pale skin and the sweat on his forehead that indicates shock. She thinks of Marcus, the man she dated before Noah, the one who worked in the ER at Jackson Memorial. She thinks of what he taught her about pressure points and hemorrhage control before he left her, before he decided she was too much trouble. She moves. Her body remembers what her mind has tried to forget. 12 years ago, before Noah was born, before everything collapsed, she worked as a nursing assistant in a clinic. For 18 months, she changed dressings and held hands and learned the architecture of human fragility. That life feels like someone else's dream now. Move, she says, and something in her voice, something that cuts through shock and hierarchy and the strange grammar of power, makes Theo step back. She grabs clean bar towels from beneath the counter, shoves them against the wound with pressure that makes Luca hiss through his teeth. Elevate his legs. Now. Sergio and Theo exchange a look that lasts less than a second, but in it is entire conversations. This skeletal woman with a destroyed face, wearing a stained apron that smells like coffee and grease, is issuing orders. They obey. His pulse, Valentina demands. She presses her fingers to Luca's neck. The rhythm jumps beneath her touch like a bird trapped in a cage. It's too fast. Shock is setting in. If he doesn't get a surgeon within 8 minutes, he bleeds out in this booth. The doctor, Sergio, begins. Is too slow, she finishes. You need a hospital. Not an option, Luca says. His eyes open, focusing on her face with the precision of a predator. Dark eyes, storm gray at the edges where the light catches them. He stares at her bruised throat, at the finger marks blooming purple and black beneath her jaw. You're hurt. I'm fine, she says. She is not fine. She has not been fine in months. She checks his pulse again. Stay conscious. Talk to me. What's your name? Luca, he says. The syllables wrap around each other like silk. Stay with me, Luca. Outside, the thunder cracks so violently that the windows rattle in their frames. Lightning splits the sky, illuminating the diner for one terrible second, and in that light, Valentina sees blood everywhere. On her hands. On the booth. On the floor spreading in a dark lake. On him. The private doctor arrives at 3:39 a.m. in a black Mercedes SUV, carrying a leather bag that probably costs more than her monthly rent used to cost when she had a monthly rent. He's a thin man with silver hair and the expensive bearing of someone who has spent his career asking no questions. He moves with efficiency that borders on supernatural, administering fluids, applying sterile dressing, checking vitals with instruments Valentina does not recognize. Stable, he pronounces finally. Bullet missed the lung. Bleeding controlled. He needs real surgery, but he can move. They load Luca into the Mercedes. His eyes find her one more time as Sergio and Theo support his weight between them. Your name, he rasps. Valentina Harper, she says, already turning back toward the booth, already reaching for the bloody towels. Good luck, Luca. She does not know that Luca Russo is the man who controls the eastern quadrant of Miami's underworld. She does not know that he has built an empire on loyalty and violence, that his word is law, that men have disappeared for far less offense than crossing him. She does not know that he never forgets a debt, and that in saving his life, she has set something in motion that will remake the entire geography of her existence. She wipes blood from the cracked vinyl. Old Eddie watches from the counter, his ancient eyes knowing better than to speak. The diner settles back into quiet. The rain continues its assault on the windows, and somewhere in the night, a man who has lost everything finds, in the hands of a nobody, the only grace he has felt in 12 years. 41 hours later, Valentina returns to her apartment at 4:15 a.m., soaking wet from the storm, her entire body shaking with cold and something deeper, something like the edge of a cliff you cannot see in darkness. The eviction notice on her door reads, in stark black letters, 5 days remaining. Below that, final notice. Noah wheezes on the couch, his small chest heaving with each breath. She bought the medicine with the $17 and a prayer, choosing between food and his lungs, a mathematics of survival that no parent should ever have to perform. The pharmacist gave her a 3-day supply. 3 days of breathing. What comes after that belongs to a future she cannot calculate. She sits beside him, listening to the sound of his struggle, when the knock comes at the door. 2 massive men stand in the hallway. Sergio and Theo, wearing the same black suits, their presence filling the narrow space like a threat made flesh. Sergio's eyes are steady and professional. Mr. Russo requests your presence. I can't leave Noah. Her voice is hoarse. The bruises on her throat have deepened to the color of storm clouds. He knows you need help, Theo says. His gaze moves past her, settling on Noah on the couch, on the boy's small body fighting for breath. He wants to repay what you did. The word help feels like a trap baited with hope. The mansion in Coral Gables rises from manicured grounds like a monument to another world. Iron gates part silently, revealing a circular driveway with a fountain at its center, water catching the afternoon light like scattered diamonds. Marble steps lead upward, and security cameras track every angle with the patience of patient things. Armed guards stand positioned at corners, their suits tailored to hide the weapons underneath. Inside, marble floors are polished to such brightness that Valentina sees her own reflection, skeletal, hollow-eyed, still wearing the stained waitress uniform. She feels like a smear of dirt on a masterpiece. Crystal chandeliers drip light from the ceiling. Oil paintings in gold frames line the walls, ancestors of wealth, probably, or expensive nothing that costs enough to matter. The smell is leather and expensive wood and air conditioning powerful enough to feel like a climate all its own. Luca descends the curved staircase slowly, moving with the careful precision of a man relearning his body's geography. He wears a fresh black shirt, unbuttoned enough at the collar to show the bandaging beneath. His features are sharp, almost ascetic, but his dark eyes hold something that makes Valentina's breath catch. Gentleness. She has not seen gentleness in so long that she nearly does not recognize it. Sergio and Theo stand frozen near the entrance. Their shock is visible, radiating from them like heat from a wound. You saved my life, Luca says. His accent is subtle, the kind that emerges only on certain words, certain syllables. I pay my debts. Valentina's hands clench into fists. I don't need charity. It's not charity. It's mathematics. You gave me my life. I give you what you need. What is it? The question hangs between them like a challenge. She could lie. She could smile and refuse and walk away with her dignity intact, whatever dignity she has left. Instead, the truth spills from her like blood from a wound. Harold Brennan. His hand on her throat. His fingers leaving maps of violence on her skin. The eviction notice. The $85,000 in 5 days. Noah's medicine that costs $200 she does not possess. The choice between her son's breathing and the roof over his head. She shows Luca the bruises. His expression does not change, but his hands curl into fists at his sides. The transformation is subtle, just the tightening of muscles, the whitening of knuckles, but it carries within it the weight of consequences. Sergio and Theo exchange a look that lasts less than 1 second, but in it is understanding. In 15 years, they have never seen him like this. The money, Luca says quietly. It's handled. The medicine. It's handled. You and your son will stay here until your landlord is no longer a problem. Why? The word breaks in her throat. Why would you help me? I'm nobody. Luca takes her to a closed door on the 2nd floor. He opens it slowly, the hinges moving without sound. Inside is a nursery, pale yellow walls, an unused crib with pristine white bedding, tiny clothes folded carefully on a dresser, a mobile hanging motionless above where a baby's eyes would never see it. My daughter, he says. His voice cracks like ice beneath weight. Ji-yun. Stillborn. 12 years ago. I've never touched this room since. The silence that follows is absolute. You fight for your son the way I would have fought for her, he continues. That's why. Meanwhile, in an office above a strip mall on Flagler, Harold Brennan counts cash from his predatory schemes. Stacks of money earned from the desperation of people like Valentina, from women who have nothing and landlords who know it. His hands are thick, his knuckles scarred from violence that predates any of his current victims. A phone rings. He answers before the 2nd ring. Harold, darling, Victoria Ashford's voice carries the cultured cruelty of old money. I've been reviewing our properties. The Harper woman in Collins Avenue, she's 3 months behind. Handling it personally, he says. The words carry weight. Make sure you do. I don't tolerate freeloaders. If she can't pay, she entertains consequences. Victoria laughs, a sound like breaking glass. They speak as if Valentina is a problem to be solved, a variable in an equation, something with no weight and no worth. Victoria Ashford stands at the Biscayne Bay Charity Gala that evening, 58 years old but carrying her age like a weapon. Diamonds hang from her throat and wrists. Her dress costs more than Valentina's entire existence. She is surrounded by Miami's elite, politicians and bankers and business owners who have built their fortunes on the foundation of other people's suffering. She smiles for the cameras with the precision of someone who has practiced that smile 10,000 times. A reporter asks about affordable housing initiatives. Victoria's response is smooth as silk. We provide opportunities. If people can't seize them, that's not our failing. Behind the smile is calculation so precise it could cut glass. She has spent her life erasing people, and she has no intention of stopping now. Late evening. Noah arrives at the mansion carrying a stuffed animal, a bear with one eye missing. He's 6 years old, small for his age, with dark curly hair and an inhaler in his pocket. His eyes widen at the chandeliers, at the marble floors, at the impossible size of everything. He has never been anywhere this beautiful, and the beauty terrifies him. Luca watches from the doorway of his study. The boy reminds him of everything he lost, of all the things he will never teach or hold or watch grow into the world. Sergio brings Noah his medicine, the exact prescription, plus 3 months' supply. Valentina breaks, her entire body folding inward like paper catching fire. Why? She asks again. Why would you do this? Because no child should wheeze for breath while his mother watches, Luca says simply. That night, after Noah falls asleep in a guest room with silk sheets he will not stop touching, Luca makes a phone call. His voice carries the flatness of a man accustomed to being obeyed. I want everything. Bank accounts, business partners, every dirty secret. I want to know every connection between Brennan and Ashford. Every camera that loves her. Every ally they have bought. I want the architecture of their empire mapped down to the smallest brick. In the darkness of Coral Gables, something cold and dangerous stirs in his chest. The doctor had warned him not to stress his wound, to take time for healing. Luca has never been good at listening to warnings. He pours himself whiskey and watches the city lights stretch toward the horizon like a kingdom waiting to be rearranged. Tomorrow, his men will begin their work. Tomorrow, Harold Brennan and Victoria Ashford will learn that the people they thought were nobodies sometimes stand beside men who can dismantle the world. Tonight, for the first time in 12 years, the door to the sealed nursery remains open, letting light pour into that room of ghosts and grief and impossible hope. The balcony railing pressed cold against her palms as rain hammered down like bullets from a merciless sky. Valentina Harper stood 3 stories above the garden, her borrowed silk dress clinging to her body, soaked through. The summer thunderstorm had returned to Miami with the fury of a curse, lightning cracking the heavens open, and she was dying inside, not because of the storm, but because she had brought the storm with her. Noah was safe in that mansion. Noah was breathing easier. Noah might live. But she had brought predators to the door. Harold Brennan knew where she was now. Victoria Ashford's people had been circling. She was nobody, just a waitress with a dead mother's locket and $17 that she'd had to beg Luca to let her keep. How had she thought this could end differently? The wind tore across the balcony like a blade wrapped in ice. She stared down at the garden below, at the way the rain softened everything, made the ground seem almost inviting. One step. That's all it would take. One moment of surrender, and Noah would be free of her burden. He would have Luca. He would have medicine and safety and everything she could never give him. He would be fine without her. He would. Her inhaler fell from her pocket. Not hers. Noah's. The small blue device clattered against marble, and she watched it settle at her feet like a prayer answered in reverse. She stared at it for 3 heartbeats. Then 4. Then 10. Her hands moved before her mind could catch them, reaching down, clutching that worn little inhaler against her chest like it was the only thing keeping her anchored to the earth. She picked it up and held it tight. Held it like Noah's life was in her hands, because it was. Not today. Not while he needed her. The rain soaked through her clothes as she turned back toward the glass doors. And there, framed in the doorway like a man who had been carved from midnight itself, stood Luca Russo. He was drenched. Every tailored inch of him soaked, his white shirt clinging to his chest, water streaming from his dark hair. He had followed her into the rain without hesitation. His storm-gray eyes burned with something that looked like fury and something that looked like fear. "You're not alone anymore," he said. His voice came out low, solid, like an oath sworn into the darkness. "Let me finish this." She stood there, shaking, the inhaler still pressed against her heart. "If I stay, if I let you do this, I'm putting Noah in danger. Don't you see? They know I'm connected to you now. Victoria will use it. Brennan will use it. I should leave. I should. You should let me love you," Luca said. And the words landed like a blade through her chest. "Let me do what I was built to do. Protect. Dismantle. Destroy. You've already saved my life once. Let me return the favor." She didn't argue. Not because she believed him, but because her legs were giving out, and he caught her, and his arms around her felt like the first safe place she'd ever known. That next morning, as Miami's sun crept across expensive windows, Valentina sat in the mansion's television room with Noah asleep against her shoulder. The morning news show played on a screen the size of a wall. And then she saw her. Victoria Ashford sat in a chair bathed in studio lights, her blonde hair perfect, her smile poison and diamonds. The interview, a young woman with respect written across her face, was nodding along to Victoria's words. And that's why our housing initiatives focus on personal responsibility, Victoria was saying, her voice like honey dripped over broken glass. People like Ms. Valentina Harper are cautionary tales. When individuals live beyond their means, when they refuse to meet their obligations to their landlords, to their communities, society simply must protect itself. I hope Ms. Harper learns responsibility. The name hung in the air. Her name. On every screen in Miami. The story had leaked. Someone had called the press, and they had run with it, the evicted waitress, the desperate mother, the woman who had disappeared into the night. And Victoria Ashford had weaponized it. The interview went viral in minutes. Comments flooded in, cruel and relentless. Viewers who didn't know her story, who only saw a woman who couldn't pay her rent, who must have done something wrong. Who must have deserved it. Valentina's hand shook. Humiliation burned across her face like a brand. Luca appeared in the doorway. He had seen the broadcast. His jaw was locked so tight she thought his teeth might break. He watched her with eyes that had gone cold as winter seas. She just made a mistake, he said quietly. Showing her hand. Reminding everyone that she exists. He pulled out his phone and made a single call. It's time. At 3:22 a.m., when the city slept and the rain had finally stopped, Luca Russo moved. 12 men in black tactical gear assembled in the garage of his mansion like shadows taking solid form. Each one of them had bled for Luca at some point. Each one of them would have walked into fire for him. Sergio checked his equipment with the precision of a man who had done this 1,000 times. Theo moved with the controlled grace of a panther closing in on prey. They did not speak. They did not need to. The operation had been planned down to every second, every door, every camera angle. The first team hit Harold Brennan's office building at 3:04 a.m. Brennan had been asleep on the leather couch in his private office, surrounded by files and stacks of cash that represented decades of extortion. The door exploded inward. He woke screaming, his body flailing in panic, his hands reaching for the gun he kept in his desk drawer, but Sergio was already there, already moving, slamming him against the wall with enough force to drive the air from his lungs. Don't move. Don't speak. Don't even breathe differently, Sergio said. His voice was quiet. Quiet voices were more terrifying than screams. They showed him the files. Every single one. Recordings of him propositioning tenants, his voice unmistakable, crude, explicit. Financial documents showing the pattern of extortion, the way he had systematized terror into a business model. Photographs of him with Victoria Ashford, documents linking them together, showing how they had carved up the city's poorest neighborhoods and fed on them like parasites. And then they showed him the federal agents waiting in the lobby downstairs. Luca's investigators had wrapped every piece of evidence into a bow and delivered it to the FBI, all of it airtight, all of it irrefutable, all of it on camera. Prison, Luca said. He stood in the doorway like a judge of the damned. 40 years minimum. Harold. You had one choice. Leave Valentina Harper alone, and you might have lived out your days as a free man. You chose wrong. Harold Brennan collapsed to his knees, his bulk folding in on itself like a house with rotten foundations. He was weeping, trembling like a cornered animal with nowhere left to run. His hand shook as the federal agents placed handcuffs around his wrists. News cameras, tipped off by someone who understood the power of a story, captured every moment. Brennan's face, red with rage and terror, disappeared into the back of a government vehicle. The footage would be broadcast on every station in Miami by dawn. Meanwhile, in a waterfront penthouse that overlooked Biscayne Bay, Victoria Ashford was answering her door in a silk robe the color of champagne. The federal agents had warrants. The warrants listed financial crimes, housing fraud, racketeering, conspiracy. Victoria's face went white. Her hands trembled as she read the papers. This wasn't possible. This was not something that happened to women like her. She had friends. She had connections. She had nothing. At 8:51 a.m., every news station in Miami broadcast the evidence simultaneously. Leaked recordings of Victoria laughing with Brennan about how to evict families faster, to maximize profit margins, to crush anyone who couldn't pay. Financial documents showing her offshore accounts, her shell corporations, the way she had built a fortune on the misery of the vulnerable. Photographs of her with known criminals, with city officials who had been paid to look the other way. Her face was everywhere. On screens. On newspapers. Splashed across social media like a stain that couldn't be washed clean. At her country club, longtime friends turned their backs in unison. Her phone rang non-stop with business partners withdrawing. Former allies released statements denouncing her, protecting themselves, abandoning her like rats from a sinking ship. The woman who had spent decades constructing a perfect social image watched it disintegrate in real time. By noon, federal agents executed a dawn raid on her penthouse. Victoria stood at her windows in the same silk robe, mascara running down her face, watching herself being arrested on live television. The cameras captured everything, her composure finally crumbling, the social queen dethroned in front of millions, the kingdom she had built with cruelty and calculation collapsing like a house made of ash. Luca watched the broadcast from his study. Valentina stood beside him, holding Noah against her hip, watching her tormentors fall into the darkness they had dug for everyone else. "Why didn't you just kill them?" she whispered. Luca's hand found hers. His fingers were warm, solid, real. "Death is too quick, too easy, too merciful. I wanted them to live with it. Every day in a cell, every mirror that shows them what they've become, every realization that they destroyed their own lives. That's the punishment that matters. Not the ending. The living with it." The city woke to a new world. The predators who had owned the shadows were gone. And in a mansion filled with marble and chandeliers and impossible beauty, a waitress held her son's hand while he slept, and she finally let herself believe that this beautiful, terrifying, improbable thing might actually be real. Outside, the sun broke through the last of the storm clouds. And sometimes miracles come from the most unexpected places. 2 weeks had passed since the federal agents descended on Victoria Ashford's penthouse like a storm with badges, and the silence that followed was louder than any scream. Harold Brennan sat in a federal detention cell awaiting trial, his bail denied by a judge who read the evidence and saw not a businessman but a predator wearing an expensive suit. The news cycle moved on to other crises, but in Miami's quietest corners, people still whispered about the landlord and the socialite who had underestimated a woman counting $17 in tips and a man who had finally found a reason to stop haunting himself. The mansion on the hill stood exactly as it always had, marble floors gleaming like frozen water, chandeliers casting golden light across rooms too large for sound to travel normally. But something had shifted in those rooms, something invisible to the eye but present in every breath taken within those walls. Valentina Harper walked through the kitchen that afternoon, Noah's small hand wrapped around her index finger, both of them covered in flour from the bread they were baking with Rosa, the head chef who had worked in this house for 17 years and had never once seen Luca Russo sit at the kitchen table eating warm bread with his fingers like a normal man. "More salt," Rosa instructed, her voice carrying the accent of someone who had never quite left Naples in her heart. "You taste it first. You decide. No one else." Valentina pinched the dough and brought it to her mouth, tasting the yeast, the warmth, the possibility. Noah watched her face with the absolute concentration of a 5-year-old who believed his mother could see things invisible to everyone else. Behind them, in the library visible through the open doorway, Luca sat with Sergio, reviewing documents, the transformation of his business empire from shadow to substance, from criminal enterprise to legitimate import and export operations that paid taxes and passed audits and would one day mean that his name appeared in business journals instead of federal files. "Is it good, Mama?" Noah asked, tugging her sleeve. She had become his mother without paperwork, without legal ceremony, simply through the daily physics of loving a child and showing up every single morning. 3 weeks ago, Valentina had knelt beside his bed as he slept and whispered a confession to the darkness. "I will protect you, I promise," and the words had sealed something in her chest that felt like finally coming home. "It's perfect," she said, and kissed the flower from his forehead. Luca appeared in the kitchen doorway at precisely 4:06 in the afternoon, a time so specific because he had begun checking the clock whenever she was in the room, measuring the distance between moments when he could see her face. He wore no jacket, his sleeves rolled to the elbows, and there was flour in his dark hair from where Noah had jumped on him that morning while he was reviewing contracts. Sergio had witnessed it and had said nothing, but his expression suggested that in 15 years of working for Luca Russo, he had never once imagined his boss on the kitchen floor playing chess with a 5-year-old child. "The businesses are transitioning faster than expected," Luca said, but he was looking at Valentina. "We need someone with an eye for detail managing the documentation. Someone I trust absolutely." She turned from the counter, her hand sticky with dough, understanding immediately what he was proposing and refusing it in the same breath. "I'm a waitress. I don't know anything about import and export or—" "You kept a child alive on $17 and pure willpower," he interrupted, his voice like thunder wrapped in velvet. "You negotiated with a predator while your body was breaking. You managed impossible things with nothing. I need you to help me manage the legitimate side of what I'm building. Not as a favor. As a partner." The word partner hung in the air between them like a bridge neither of them had fully crossed yet. Valentina's breath caught somewhere in her chest where she kept the dangerous things: hope, trust, the terrifying possibility that this beautiful, violent man genuinely wanted her in his life not as a rescued thing but as an equal force. "I'd have to learn everything," she said quietly. "Then we learn together," he replied. That evening, after Noah was asleep in the bedroom that had become his, Valentina found Luca in the library surrounded by leather-bound books and the ghosts of a life he had built around absence. The nursery door stood closed at the far end of the hallway, a door she had learned not to mention, a threshold he had not crossed in 12 years. But tonight, he was different. Tonight, he gestured for her to follow him down the hallway, and when his hand found hers, his palm was warm and solid and real. The nursery was frozen in time. A white crib with railings like ivory teeth. A changing table with folded diapers that would never be used. A mobile with stars that had never turned for a living child. Photographs on the dresser, Luca younger, his face unbroken by the scars that now marked him, holding a woman with dark eyes and a smile like sunrise. Gian, Valentina understood without being told. The wife. The baby who never breathed. "I haven't been able to." Luca's voice fractured. He did not cry. His men had never seen him cry, and he was not about to begin now. But something in his shoulders shifted, some weight he had been carrying since before Valentina was even born began to settle differently. "I couldn't let go." Letting go felt like betraying her. Valentina took his hand. Her fingers were smaller, marked with the calluses of someone who had spent years serving other people's meals, but they were strong. "She would want you to live. Not haunt yourself. Live." "How do you know what she would want?" he asked, but not defensively, genuinely curious, like a man asking how someone had learned to see in the dark. "Because anyone who loved you would never want you to stop living on the night she died," Valentina said. "And I think she loved you very much." 3 hours later, they had entered the nursery together. The crib was dismantled and stored. The diapers were donated. The photographs of Gian remained on the dresser because some things were meant to stay, just in a different form, not a shrine, but a memory honored and released. Luca kept one photograph in his pocket, small enough to hold without breaking. "I want to build something with you," he said. They were standing in what had been the nursery, now empty, already becoming something new. Not like this, not built on absence. Built on presence. Built on you choosing to be here. That choice arrived 2 days later, on a Tuesday morning when the sun broke through Miami's permanent haze and turned the mansion's marble into something that resembled light itself. Valentina stood in Luca's study, the same study where he had once ordered men into the night to hunt Harold Brennan, and now she was here by choice, holding documents, learning systems, becoming the person who stood beside him in legitimate business. "You're really going to teach me everything?" she asked, and there was still disbelief in her voice, still the echo of a woman who had once believed that people like her did not get this. "Everything," he confirmed. She extended her hand, meaning to shake his and seal some kind of business agreement, a transaction, a neat division of labor and compensation. But his hand found hers and did not shake it. Instead, his fingers intertwined with hers, held, and when he drew her closer, the world outside the library seemed to stop, the traffic on distant streets, the sound of birds in the garden, Noah's laughter from somewhere in the mansion, everything paused as his forehead touched hers and they stood in the exact space between what they had been and what they were becoming. "I'm terrified," she whispered. "So am I," he said. "But not of you. Never of you." 6 months later, Valentina Harper sat in a climate-controlled office on the 40th floor of a building in downtown Miami, reviewing quarterly reports for one of Luca's legitimate import companies. Her fingernails were manicured, a small luxury she would never have allowed herself before. Her clothes fit her properly, tailored for someone with a future. The bruises had faded completely from her neck, and when she looked in the mirror now, she barely recognized the terrified woman who had once counted $17 and believed that was all she would ever have. Noah was thriving. Private school. Friends. A tutor who came to the mansion twice a week. He no longer flinched at sudden movements, no longer woke screaming from nightmares about eviction notices and predatory hands. When people asked him where he lived, he said, "In a big house with a library and a garden where Sergio teaches me chess," and his voice held the solid certainty of a child who had learned that some people did stay. The nursery had transformed into a reading room. Luca sat there with Noah most evenings, reading aloud from children's books, his deep voice bringing stories to life for a boy who had learned that the most powerful man in Miami became gentle when that child was in the room. The photograph of Ji-Yun remained on the shelf, but it was no longer a wound, it was a memory held with open hands instead of desperate fists. That evening, as the sun descended toward the horizon and painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, the three of them walked through the garden. Noah between them, holding both their hands, swinging slightly as they moved, his laughter like bells. Valentina thought about that night in the pharmacy when she had exactly $17 and no hope, when she had whispered prayers to a God she wasn't sure was listening. She thought about Harold Brennan, now serving a 40-year federal sentence, his predatory empire dismantled brick by brick, his name synonymous with cruelty. She thought about Victoria Ashford, under house arrest, her frozen assets hemorrhaging, her social kingdom reduced to ash and public scorn. Justice had come not with gunfire but with evidence, with exposure, with the systematic destruction of everything these people had built on the suffering of others. She thought about that night in Booth 7, blood pooling beneath a tailored jacket, a man everyone feared bleeding out while a waitress with $17 in her pocket moved on instinct and saved his life. She thought about how saving a stranger became saving herself. "Tell me something," Luca said, as they paused beneath a stone arch in the garden. The city lights were beginning to glow in the distance, Miami's sprawl sparkling like scattered diamonds. "Do you believe in second chances?" "I'm living mine," Valentina replied. He took her hand, not as business partners now, but as something that had no name in any language, something that existed only between them. "Will you marry me?" The word marriage hung in the evening air like a question that had been asked 1,000 times but never meant exactly like this, not as transaction, not as rescue, but as two people choosing each other in full knowledge of the scars they both carried. "Yes," she said. Simply. Completely. Noah looked between them with the absolute confidence of a child who had learned to read these moments. "Does this mean we stay forever?" "Forever," Luca confirmed. They walked into the mansion together as darkness settled over Miami, a woman who had once been invisible, a man who had been feared, and a child who had learned that rescue comes in unexpected forms. The rain had cleared. The sky was visible again, stars emerging like small mercies, like promises kept, like the evidence that sometimes miracles come from the most impossible places. This story teaches us that justice is not always loud, and rescue is not always obvious. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is save someone else, even when you believe you have nothing left to give. Love and protection come from unexpected places, and the courage to accept help is just as powerful as the courage to give it. After the rain, the sky clears. And sometimes miracles come from the most unexpected places. If this story moved your heart, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to believe in second chances. Subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the next story about unexpected heroes and people who refuse to give up. New stories drop tomorrow. Until then, remember this: you are never as alone as you think you are. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. We wish you good health, joy, and days filled with peace and happiness. Goodbye, and we will see you again in the next video.